June 6, 1944. Before the first landing craft noses toward Omaha, the rails of France are already bleeding time. If you're here because history still moves you, lean in. And if you're new, subscribe to What If Wars, so you don't miss what comes next. Listen to the stakes in plain terms. D-Day is not only a story of beaches and bravery. It's a race clocked in minutes and measured in bridges. If German reserves reach the coast in coherent strength by midday, the tide can turn against the men in those boats. If the reserves arrive late, piecemeal, thirsty for fuel, light on shells, the beachhead breathes. That difference lives on steel rails and stone piers, in timetables and choke points, not just in tonnage dropped from the sky. That's why the argument inside the Allied camp feels so urgent. On one side, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder, Trafford Lee Mallory, and the zoologist-turned-strategist Solly Zuckerman. They want to strike the network, not the nation. Hit the nodes that make the rails useful, marshalling yards, junctions, and bridge crossings, where a single break multiplies into days of delay. On the other side, Sir Arthur Harris of Bomber Command. He argues to keep pounding German cities and factories, to crush industrial will at the source. The room is thick with maps, cigarette smoke, and the weight of moral math. Do you break a web so armies can't move, knowing the web runs through cities where people sleep? Eisenhower chooses time over tonnage. The transportation plan is born. Pattern break. Think of a switchman in a dark hut at the edge of the Trappes yard outside Paris, rubbing coal dust from his eyes as sirens rise. 1 yard like Trappes is not just tracks and sheds. It's a heart valve for an entire region. Close it, and trains stack up for miles. Engines idling, orders piling, messages crossing wires to nowhere. A single span down at Mantes on the Seine or Saumur on the Loire can force a detour of 60 miles, then a missed crossing window, then a second stack at the next choke point. Minutes turn into hours, hours into days. That's the geometry of delay. From March through June 1944, the Allies train their rhythm like a hammer with two faces. By day, the U.S. 8th and 9th Air Forces throw precision raids. Bomb lines walked across targets, crews counting 3, 2, 1, over a bridge at Vernon, over the Rouen-Sotteville yards where freight cars sit like dominoes. By night, RAF heavies roll in, lanterns in the sky, to keep repair crews off balance and keep the railways from catching their breath. Photo reconnaissance looks again and again, stitching together a living map from blur and shadow. Resistance couriers bring whispers from stations at Amiens, Lens, Lille, Aulnoy-et-Mériz, which sidings are active, which transformers hum, which spans wear fresh scaffolding that should not survive the week. Another pattern break, numbers. March 7th, 1944. First test blows land on key yards to see how the system reacts. Late March, Trappes, Amiens, Rouen-Sotteville, Aulnoy feel the hammer. April, the circle widens, not just to destroy, but to deny repair cycles. Hit at dusk when welders roll out torches. Hit at dawn when crews dare the open. The point isn't to make craters. It's to steal time and keep stealing it. There's a moral tremor running under all of this. Yards sit inside cities. Families live on those streets. A French mother pulls her children beneath a kitchen table as the sirens climb and the windows flex. Somewhere above, a navigator rechecks the target, breathing steady, because a bridge at Rouen means fuel not reaching a panzer column tomorrow. No one in this story is clean. Everyone knows what the clock costs. Inside Allied headquarters, the argument shifts from if to how hard. Tedder wants bridges, and lots of them. Zuckerman's charts show where a single pier collapse jams entire regions. Lee Mallory pushes for the air umbrella that will keep fighter bombers free to hunt road columns once the rails fail. Harris, still unconvinced, sees cities that he believes must burn for the war to end. Eisenhower listens, sets his jaw, and points to the map of northern France. The Seine crossings at Rouen, Vernon, Mantes, the Loire at Orléans, Tours, Saumur, the big yards at Lens and Lille, the junction at Aulnoy that ties the lines to Belgium. The plan narrows from theory into a list of names. Hear the texture of what's coming. Daylight formations over chalk rivers and green fields. Nights where cities go dark and the echo of engines draws a line across rooftops. Resistance hands mark targets with a flash of a mirror in fields. Photo recon brings back frames where a bridge span is simply gone. The network stumbles. Schedules slip. A train that should have crossed at dawn is still waiting at noon. A second train is waiting behind it. A third never left. And then consider who depends on those lines. Panzerlehr in late May will count on rail spines to move heavy armor toward Normandy in coherent blocks. The 2nd SS, Das Reich, will try to come north from the south, through towns where saboteurs pry up fish plates and blow culverts. If the rails don't hold, those formations will have to scatter to the roads, creeping at night, hunted by fighter bombers at first light, burning fuel they can't replace fast enough. That is the bet the Allies are making in the spring of 1944. Not just to bomb, but to freeze. We're standing at the mouth of that spring now. March, April, May. Each page of the calendar is a lever on the enemy's mobility. The rails of France are about to turn from arteries into traps. If time is the real target, where do you hit first? March 1944 opens like a map being unfolded on a kitchen table. Creases along the Seine and the Loire, pinholes over Paris, chalk lines running north to Belgium. The plan breathes in nodes, not miles. It doesn't care about every track. It cares about what every track depends on. Start with the marshalling yards, the hearts that push blood. Traps, just southwest of Paris. A web of sidings where trains are cut and made. At dawn, boxcars idle under a haze of coal smoke. A switch engine coughs, dragging 30 cars toward a signal that decides whole days. Aulnoye-et-Mériez, up near the Belgian border. A hinge that swings traffic east and north, the kind of place where a single transformer hit turns timetables into rumors. Lens and Lille in the north, coal and steel and crossroads. Amiens and Rouen-Sotteville along the Somme and the Seine, big yards jammed into living cities, factories on one side, apartments on the other, tours to the south on the Loire, a sorter for the center of France. These aren't just names, they're valves. Close a few, and pressure rises everywhere else. Pattern break, bridges, the Seine at Rouen, Vernon, Mantes, the Loire at Orléans, Tours, Saumur. Stone ribs over green water, each span a promise that if a train gets this far, it keeps its schedule. Drop one span, and the promise breaks. Suddenly a crossing becomes a detour. 20 miles, then 60, then not today. Meanwhile, the next yard feels like a parking lot on a holiday weekend, and the phone lines start to sound like panic. Mechanism matters. Destroy a yard and trains don't blow up in neat rows. They stack. Crews step down to wait. Locomotives idle hot. Couplers go missing. Brakes freeze. Paperwork piles. Hit a bridge and you don't just make a river wider. You steal windows. Military trains move under tight slots, night crossings, low-profile hours, protection at junctions. Miss one slot, and you don't magically get another. You slide into tomorrow, and then into someone else's slot, and the jam spreads. Hit repair teams at dusk and dawn, the hours when courage feels most useful. And you don't just hurt steel, you reset the clock. The rhythm is a relay. By day, U.S. bomb groups ride in on the sun, bomb lines stepped across yards like stitches, crosshairs crawling toward a signal gantry, a powerhouse, the exact pier that takes down a whole bridge. Crews memorize the silhouette at Mantes, low arches, a bend in the river, rooftops tight to the bank. By night, RAF heavies bring the citywide thunder, sustained, disorienting, the kind that chases welders away from their lamps and keeps cranes idle. Weather is a third commander. When cloud breaks open, a bridge run that would have scrubbed becomes a clean line of approach. When rain holds over a yard, the job shifts to the next target. Before dawn whistles the crews to cover. Human texture. Feel it. In a cabin at Rouen-Sotteville, a French switchman lays a trembling palm against a radio that spits and crackles. The siren in the street rises like a string pulled too tight. He's been told to throw line 4 when the signal drops, but the signal is ash in the air. He looks at a photo thumbtacked to the wall, a wife, a girl in a wool coat, and waits for the first concussion to punch through the floorboards. He can hear cattle lowing in a freight car somewhere out in the dark. Above the river at Vernon, a U.S. bombardier counts seconds with his teeth clenched. 3, 2, 1, pickle. The bombs step off the rack in a tidy mechanical shrug, and for a beat, there is nothing but wind. Then the bridge throws a curtain of dust and stone into the sky. He can't see the people in the houses at the water's edge shutting their eyes. He only knows the span must not be there tomorrow. Pattern break, names and numbers. Traps, long sidings where 200 cars can hide until they can't. Aulnoy-et-Marys, a funnel for everything north. Knock out the substation and signal boxes and you erase a day. Lens and Lille, coal flows that feed industry, and more importantly, switches that feed the army. Amiens, a knot where cutting one rope loosens 10. Tours, a sorting yard for the lower Loire, where one pier ripped out of the river turns the entire left bank into dead space for a week. Even repair has a tempo you can fight. Bridge engineers need barges, cranes, calm water, and hours without fear. Yard crews need replacement rails, spare couplers, laborers who will show up when the all-clear feels like a joke. Hit at dusk, you send them home. Hit at dawn, you erase everything they did in the night. Hit the powerhouse that feeds the signals and the night crews have to work by lantern. Hit the water towers and locomotives sit dry. Every strike chooses a bottleneck, not a crater. Every bottleneck chokes the same thing, time. Another ground-level slice. In a flat on the Rue du Havre, a mother lines up shoes by the door as sirens spool up. She pulls a mattress toward an interior wall and tells two boys to crawl underneath. Outside, the windows bend and snap back. The room breathes dust as if the building itself is afraid. Tomorrow, she will take those boys to the station platform with a suitcase to look for a train that never comes. A schedule pinned to a bulletin board will yellow in the sun and lie to everyone who reads it. By the third week of March, the plan has feel. USA, AF by day, RAF by night. Recon landing photos on tables still warm from the next briefing. Targets learn to flinch, then to hide, then to accept that hiding is just waiting for the next pass. The map on the wall grows thumbtacks and red thread. A messenger from the resistance brings word from Aulnoy, signals down, traffic backed to the fields. Somewhere on the Seine, a bridge now ends in air. By late March, the clock begins to slow. Late March 1944, the timetable starts to lie. March 27th, Aulnoy-et-Marys. Dawn comes thin and gray over the junction, where lines to Belgium braid together. U.S. bombers step a neat line across the substation and the signal boxes, and for a moment, the yard looks untouched, rails shining, switches still, men frozen in place. Then the power coughs out. Semaphores drop to dead. A freight snake a half-mile long sighs to a halt with a clank that runs car to car. Paper orders can't move trains when the needles in the instruments point to nothing. The first stack of the day is born. March 29, traps. Paris still yawns when formations find the sidings. Crews ride the bomb line over target lights and smoke markers, ticking off the landmarks, the roundhouse roof, the water tower, the gantry with the big clock. Bomb racks click free. A heartbeat later, girders jump like snapped violin strings. In the aftermath, it isn't the craters that kill the schedule. It's the missing little things, sheared couplers, bent points, a transformer that hums itself to death, switch engines idle hot with nowhere to push. A yardmaster's pencil grinds through a stub of lead and scratches a new column of delays. March 30, Amiens. The yard honeycombs the river plain, rails looping around warehouses and tenements that scrape the sky. The strike package comes with clouds stacked low, the kind that makes everyone swallow twice. A hole opens. A pale oval. One group goes in single file, bombs walking across the eastern fan where outbound trains form. A transformer yard spits white fire, then goes dark. Stalled locomotives wheeze like old horses. A woman 3 blocks away watches soot fall like snow on the sill and tells her boy to keep his head down. Keep counting, keep breathing. March 31st, Rouen-Sotteville. The Seine turns like a question mark around the city. The yard slotted tight against streets that carry bread and children. First pass tears the throat out of a powerhouse. Second pass chews at the ladder, tracks where trains are built like sentences. When the smoke thins, a switchman blinks grit from his eyes and listens to a silence he's never heard before, the silence of a railway with no voice. On a wall, a schedule still promises an afternoon departure for Le Havre. It will not happen. Not today. Not soon. Pattern break. April widens the circle. Lens, Lille, Tours. The plan isn't to level and leave. It's to deny repair. Afternoon hits are followed by night raids that keep welders from striking arcs. A crane swings over a broken pier at Tours. Searchlights find it. The night answers with thunder. In the morning, the crane is tilted on its side like a toy in a sandbox. Crews learn a cruel physics. You can fix a track, but you can't fix time that's already been stolen. Cause and effect gets granular. Cratered yards mean reroutes that were never designed to carry heavy traffic. A single missing coupler strands 20 cars because the depot's spares are trapped behind another delay. A locomotive, low on water after a long wait, seizes a mile short of a junction and must be rescued by an engine that was supposed to pull artillery shells. One small break in a chain multiplies into missed connections at 3 towns, into a backlog of orders that grow teeth and bite everyone in reach. A tactically sharp minute, over the Seine, mid-April, crews briefed for a bridge run that looks doomed by weather. Cloud sits heavy. Then a seam opens along the river like a zipper. The lead bombardier calls the run hot. The formation drops a bead on the center span, corrects 2 degrees left, holds altitude through flak that looks like handfuls of black gravel thrown in their faces, and releases. A shock wave races across the water. The span gives way like a knee. When the cloud knits shut again, the target is gone, and trains on both banks look at each other across a moving mirror and wait. Another sharp minute, night over a yard near Lille. A bomb line, mistimed by seconds, starts to walk off the eastern edge. The Pathfinder calls correction, and the second wave tightens its grip, stepping bombs back across the signal gantries. Sparks climb in a long, dirty fountain. Then everything is darkness. The only lights left are the orange eyes of small fires licking at tar and timber. Somewhere in that dark, a man with a wrench decides he will not come back tomorrow. He has children who need a father more than the railway needs one more repair shift. One civilian perspective, held close. In a third-floor flat on Rue de Chartreux, a family has learned the steps of this dance. At the first siren, the mother opens the hallway closet. It's the only space without windows. She spreads a blanket, sets a chipped cup of water on the floor, and eases her daughter's hands around it to keep them busy. The first blast punches the wall. Fines of plaster float around their heads. The girl watches the dust glitter in the candle flame. After the all clear, they go outside and find their street furred in soot. In the morning, the mother bundles a small suitcase and walks to the station. The platform is a country of luggage. A chalkboard says a train will leave at 10:40. At noon, the chalkboard still says 10:40. By evening, no one believes chalk. April compounds. Repeat hits keep repair crews from gaining rhythm. Yardmasters reprint schedules they know are lies. Military trains are held back to protect them from daylight exposure, which means they collide with civilian traffic in the night slots, which means everything slows again. The Germans field flak with teeth, but flak can't lay a span back across a river. Fighter bombers learn the smell of hot brakes and the glint of canvas on a road column, hunting for a way around a broken bridge. The network that once felt elastic now feels brittle. It doesn't bend, it snaps. At headquarters, recon photos stack up, before and afters that look like a surgeon's file. Traps. The latter tracks a geometry lesson in missing lines. Aulnoy. Signal masts slumped like dead trees. Tours. A pier in the Loire missing. The river pretending it was always this wide. Messages from the resistance read like weather reports for a single storm. Traffic backed up. Crossings closed. Rumors of night trains that never appear. And yet, the war under all this is still human. A French rail worker wraps his knuckles and goes back anyway, because someone has to shovel slag away from a switch tongue so ambulances can pass. A U.S. navigator writes the names of towns he's only ever seen from 8,000 feet and wonders what color the shutters are in daylight. A British pilot counts to 5 after releasing over a yard and whispers a name into his mask, because you speak to the living when you fly through darkness. By the last week of April, the network is breathing through a straw. Trains move in fits, then freeze. Orders that once promised hours now hedge with days. The plan has done what it was built to do. It hasn't destroyed France's rails. It has paralyzed their promise. The screws turn again. The calendar flips, and everyone on both sides knows where May is headed. May will go after the bridges, the true thieves of time. May 3rd, 1944. The aim tightens like a fist. The order is simple. Take the bridges. Not in theory, not on paper, but span by span. Rouen, Vernon, Mantes on the Seine, Orléans, Tours, Saumur on the Loire. The plan stops talking about yards and starts talking about piers, arches, and the hour a river stops being a road. Early May, the first wave hunts the Seine. Rouen's crossings wear scaffolds like bandages. Vernon's arches look quiet until you line up the sight picture and see the geometry you've practiced for weeks. Mantes sits at a gentle bend that tempts a straight run. The U.S. formations come in under a bright, merciless sky. RAF heavies promise to return at night to keep the wounds open. A bridge isn't destroyed when a span falls. It's destroyed when repair crews no longer believe they can beat the dawn. May 8-9, the night-day relay begins to bite. Vernon takes hits that peelstone from piers. At Mantes, a center span lifts, hangs, and drops, like a held breath finally exhaled. Trains back up to the water's edge and stare across a space that used to be a promise. Yardmasters circle detours that add 60 miles to runs already choking on delays. A single missed crossing window becomes tomorrow's problem, which becomes everyone's problem. Pattern break, human scale. On the quay at Rouen, a French barge crew ties up and watches dust roll down the river like weather. One man squints at the bridge and tells himself it will still be there when the wind clears. It isn't. He can't hear the argument that made this happen. He can only feel the new width of the Seine. May 19th, the second push. Reports say scaffolding has gone up at 2 Seine crossings. The answer is steel and fire. A pier shatters. A span buckles. A temporary patch dies in the first hour of daylight when fighter bombers rake the approaches. Someone on the German side changes a timetable in pencil, then again in red pencil. The pencil is faster than repair, but not fast enough to outpace the jam. May 27, the map changes color. Recon frames show gaps where lines once leapt rivers. Bridges at Mantes and around Rouen red as broken teeth. On the Loire, Orléans and Tours take repeated blows. Crews trying to drop prefabricated sections under cover of darkness run from the roar that announces RAF heavies returning on schedule. Saumur becomes a stubborn problem, the river there running like a dark wire through town, the railway crossing a target you can't ignore and can't fix. Now the case studies step out of the map. Panzer-Lehr, late May into early June. Orders to move toward Normandy meet a railway that no longer believes in schedules. Heavy elements can't ride rail intact. The division breaks into columns, pushing onto roads at night, headlights off, men listening for the distant snarl of fighter bombers. June 2nd, a convoy tries to skirt a destroyed crossing near the Seine, burns fuel in a loop that no one planned, and arrives at dawn hungry for gasoline that didn't make the last mile. June 3rd, another group detours around a cratered junction, finds the detour jammed, shuts down engines to save fuel, and waits through the day under trees that don't hide the smell of hot oil. June 4th, 2 columns miss time, the same ferry slot, because the bridge they were promised is now a rumor. The division is moving, but not as a fist, more like fingers, spread and vulnerable. The 2nd SS Das Reich from the south, its path a thread pulled through towns that read like a prayer and a warning. June 6th, the order reaches Montauban. Move north. Tracks are sabotaged, culverts blown, signal cables cut by hands that disappear into hedgerows. What can't move by rail must creep by road. June 9th, while bridges north still sit in ruin, the division fights its way through the Massif Central, delayed again by cut lines and roadblocks, burning hours it cannot afford. June 10th, another day lost to diversions and reprisals that stain the map and echo far beyond any timetable. Delays accumulate not as numbers on a staff chart, but as nights without sleep, tanks idling in orchards, motorcycles waiting at crossroads for orders that keep changing because every bridge ahead has a new hole in it. Pattern break. The network logic you can feel in your bones. One span down at the Seine doesn't just block a crossing. It pushes trains back 60 miles to a viable bridge, then shoves them into a queue that only moves at night. Miss that night slot, and you land in tomorrow, colliding with someone else's slot. Yardmasters start drawing arrows that look like knots. Fighter bombers learn the gleam of canvas and the shape of a road column trying to hide in a tree line. Repair crews work under lanterns. Dawn turns lanterns into targets. May becomes early June, and the Loire keeps bleeding time. June 1st, Tours sees another attempt to lay a temporary crossing. The morning after, it splinters. June 2nd, Orléans is hit again. The rumor that a span might reopen dies in the next briefing. June 4th, Saumur's rails are harassed from the air and from the ground. Every hour gained in repair evaporates when a single approach cut severs the hope of a crossing. The rivers that once connected France now separated. On the ground, a French rail worker in overalls kneels by a signal box near Aulnoy and threads new wire through a blown conduit. He hears the drone and doesn't look up. He tells himself he is fixing a small thing, not a war. He tells himself trains are for bread and wounded and letters. Then the dust comes, fine as flour, and the new wire will wait for the next quiet that never quite arrives. Headquarters watches the calendar as if it were a living thing. Photo recon brings back hard proof. Spans down, piers shattered, sidings jammed, black rectangles where bridges used to be. Messages from the resistance tick in. Mantes impassable, Rouen patched, then cut. Detours overflowing, train counts reduced, night traffic only. The conclusion takes no rhetoric at all. Mobility, the decisive German advantage if allowed to gather, is failing in place. June 5th, 1944, night leans over the rivers. Repair crews coil cables they won't lay. Trains stand short of water they cannot cross. Columns huddle under trees and listen to roads that will be loud by morning. From the coast, a different sound comes across the fields. Wind over a sea that is about to fill with ships. France holds its breath. June 6th, 1944. First light crawls over the channel and the beaches ignite, and far inland the rails of France refuse to move. On the coast, men step into water and machine guns spray. Inland, timetables sag like wet paper. German reserves try to form, but the formations come in fragments, late and light. A staff officer in a manor house west of Paris circles units on a map and can't make the arrows touch. Bridges at Mantes and near Rouen are still out, or only half-patched. The Loire at Tours and Saumur, a broken promise. Trains stop at the riverbanks and wait for a span that will not appear today. Pattern break. Names you've met now return like echoes. Panzer Lehr spends June 6th not assembling on railheads, but dripping onto roads in separate columns, creeping under trees, headlights dead, moving only at night. Fuel trucks are late. Spare parts are later. What should have been a single armored punch becomes a set of fists that never quite close. The 2nd SS Das Reich, ordered north from the south, burns days inside the calendar, June 6th to June 10th, fighting the map as much as the enemy. Bridges down, tracks cut, culverts gone, diversions upon diversions. Where a rail lift might have moved a regiment in hours, road marches take nights, then more nights, and every dawn brings the hum of fighter bombers. June 7th, the second day. The beachhead, Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword, survives the first test. Counterattacks arrive, but they arrive thin, uncoordinated, low on ammunition and fuel. A panzer battle group meant to hit before noon comes in after dark, missing the one window when the sea lanes were most vulnerable. The difference is counted in bridges that never carried them and in yards that never sorted their trains. June 8th, the third day. Along the Seine, the queues deepen. Yardmasters scratch out orders that read like apologies. A fuel train that should have crossed near Mantes before dawn stands in shade at noon. The escort has gone ahead to find another route and found instead a crater where a junction should be. On the roads, a column from Panzer Lehr tries to turn a farm lane into a bypass and becomes its own obstacle, half-tracks idling in ruts, a stalled tank with its hatch open for air, men listening for the whistle that means dive, scatter, pray. Whatever the division once was on paper, in the fields it is a series of delays bound together by hope. Pattern break. What delay feels like up close. A German quartermaster at a rail siding near Orléans opens a crate expecting track bolts and finds the wrong size because the right size is in a freight car 2 bridges behind him. He calculates in chalk on a wagon door, wipes the numbers away with his sleeve, and writes a new set that buys him nothing but a longer wait. June 9th and 10, the 4th and 5th days. The Allies push inland. Villages breathe and burn. The 12th SS Hitlerjugend snaps at Canadian lines, but bleeds itself in piecemeal thrusts, never joined by the weight it was promised. South of the Loire, Das Reich is still climbing hills and falling into roadblocks that look like weeds until they bite. A train that might have ferried engines forward sits behind a blown culvert and watches swallows arc over still water. The network's old speed, the thing that made German counterattacks deadly in 1940 and 1941, has been replaced by a metronome that ticks too slowly to matter. Quantify it in the only way that matters. Hours turned into days. Days turned into chances the beachhead keeps. Bridges on the Seine, Mantes, spans by Rouen and Vernon, remain down or vulnerable. The Loire, Orléans, Tours, Saumur offers only gaps and treacherous patches. Dozens of trains that should have moved fuel and shells never make their slots. Dozens more never depart. Each missed crossing ripples outward into platoons short of cartridges, into tank crews watching gauges settle on empty, into commanders radioing for support that answers, delayed. June 11th and 12th, the 6th and 7th days. The beachhead links up stronger lines. The Mulberry harbors bite into the surf. Supplies stream ashore at a rate that turns the sand into a living factory. Inland, road columns meant to erase the invasion with a single stroke arrive as a series of bruises. The first week doesn't end because someone rings a bell. It ends because the window for decisive German mass closes without ever really opening. Mobility failed at the moment it was most needed, and it failed because the arteries that feed an army were cut in spring. Keep the moral ledger open while you count. Around Rouen-Sotteville, Amiens, and Lens, families pull doors off hinges to make stretchers. A father carries a child down a stairwell filled with plaster dust and sees what used to be a street turn into a maze of glass. A switchman sits on a curb with his cap in his hands and watches smoke curl from a signal box he tended for 20 years. The war they didn't choose still asked them to pay. Close the circle. March stole minutes. April stole hours. May and early June stole days and the will to believe that schedules would hold. When the ramps dropped on June 6th, the rail war had already done its part. The bridges that didn't stand and the yards that didn't hum bought the landing a breath it could not have found on its own. The men on those beaches still had to fight for every hedge and street, but the fists that might have crushed them never fully formed. The content in this video is compiled from multiple sources. If anything is wrong or needs clarification, please comment below. See you next time.